Good afternoon and welcome to this webinar on wellbeing. My name is Malcolm Fleming, Chief Executive of the New Zealand Institute of Building. This week's webinar sees us return to the subject of wellbeing, which was the topic that we started covering as we launched the NZIOB webinars during COVID-19 lockdowns last year. Today's webinar is titled Optimising Construction Performance. So rather than focusing on new technologies or emerging processes and practices that increase performance on site, what we are covering today is people performance. Specifically, we'll be targeting providing construction practitioners with the tools that will lead to the adoption of more productive behaviours that focus on maximising our physical self. Today's presenter is Dr. Andy Reid, and he wants you to reframe yourself as an athlete. Through his company, Tradie, Andy takes principles from sport and exercise science and applies them to physical workers who he believes often work harder than athletes. Andy holds an honours degree and PhD from the School of Physical Education at Otago University and has a CV that includes a stint as being part of the leadership team at Bike NZ, with his work there contributing to New Zealand's highest medal total in cycling at the 2012 London Olympics. Currently, Andy splits his week between rehabbing people from injury to facilitate a fast, safe and sustainable return of injured people back to work. He also carries out small group training sessions around manual handling, and he produces guidelines for getting the most out of your body with the adoption of strategies that consider sleep, food, movement and mindset. And thirdly, he works on his tools with his neighbour who has a landscaping business. So before I hand over to Andy, I'd like to make you aware of 3 upcoming NZIOB events. On the 11th of May in Wellington, we have a site visit to this new Sunset West Apartments. On 12th of May in Christchurch, we have the Southern Region Quiz Night. And on the 20th of May in Auckland, we have a CPD event titled Combating Supply Chain Constraints. Details of those 3 in-person events can be found on the NZIOB website. Virtually, our next webinar will feature the work of PhD candidate Jed Finch, who back in 2018 won a $10,000 NZIOB Charitable Trust Scholarship to allow him to progress his proposal to develop reusable interior wall panels. Today's webinar, please enjoy it, and please pose any questions that you have via the question function on the webinar platform. I will rejoin the webinar at around 12:45 to facilitate the question and answer session. A reminder that NZIOB members will have access to the webinar file via their membership dashboards later on today. So over to you, Andy.
Thanks, Malcolm. Thanks for the introduction. I really appreciate being able to do this and come along today. Even though we're out of COVID, when we got pretty used to doing Zoom sessions, it's never quite the same as being in front of a group of people. But we'll make the most of how we can do it today. I look forward to some questions from you guys later on. I guess the purpose for me today really is to just give you a bit of an introduction to the Tradie Athlete program that I've developed over the past few years. But probably more importantly, is just to connect to our relatively recent understanding that where we are now as a species is based on kind of 50,000 years, the last 50,000 years of where we've come from, and particularly we have kind of a blueprint from that time in terms of how we evolved that we're still really living with now. We have effectively the same genes, bar a couple of small changes as we did back then. And so there's a bunch of what we might call evolutionary mandates, or things that are pretty important for us to be thinking about and doing on a regular basis, that relate back to our genes and relate back to evolution and where we've come from. In terms of where, kind of, I guess, to frame it up a little bit for you folks, where I've come from, even as a 14-year-old, I it was at a time where there was no internet. We had things like magazines, and I used to sort of devour the New Zealand Triathlete magazine that I must have had a subscription to way back in the 80s. And from there, I got really interested in how the body works and training people, training myself really at the time. But that sort of led me in a path to the School of Physical Education that Malcolm alluded to. And I was lucky enough to stay there to do my postgraduate studies. We had a really good group of people there at the time. And out of that, the picture at the bottom of your screen here is of the writer Melissa Holt in the middle. So she was actually a research subject of mine for my PhD research that I collected the data in 1998. And she was so good from through that study that I started coaching her from that point moving forward. And 6 years later, she represented New Zealand at the Athens Olympics. About a similar time, I had an approach from through a friend of mine in Wellington, which is where I'm based, and Robin Wong, who's in the top of your screen there. She had just moved from sort of the second division of mountain biking in New Zealand to the top league in New Zealand, and so same thing. She was interested in getting the most out of herself. So I don't know whether it was good fortune to get a couple of really good athletes off the bat. If you want to be a good coach, get good athletes. That's kind of a bit of a mantra. But I was very lucky to be able to work with these two, and effectively both of them through to that Olympic Games in London. In Athens. 8 years later, I'd been involved with the New Zealand cycling program for probably the 7 years prior to that. As opposed to just being a personal coach for those two athletes at the Athens Olympics. And this is, as Malcolm alluded to again, just the success that we had at the London Olympics. So it was a pretty good Olympics for us. One of the events I was really involved with was the women's road time trial, and that was probably the most disappointing in some ways. We missed the medal by about 0.4 of a second. I think it was over, it might have been about 3 seconds, but over a 35-minute event. It was 0.4% or less of the performance difference there. So that was a bit of on the downside. It would have made the Olympics even more successful, I guess. But you had the good opportunity to work with some of the people you see in the photo here, and I guess more importantly, not just the athletes themselves, but you'll see a photo of Kat Phillips on the video camera, who's one of our performance analysts, did an amazing job for a number of years. And in the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see Dale Hollows, who is one of our mechanics, and doing what mechanics do. They work super hard when they're on all the time, prepping bikes, etc. So when they get the option to have a little bit of a rest, that's the sort of thing they like to do, is just take some Z's where they can get it. So yeah, I guess around probably in the intervening time since then to now, I've really got involved in the rehabilitation side of things, getting people back to work, and then looking at, I guess, started to think about, well, how can I relate sport and performance into the kind of manual worker type roles? So calling it construction athlete or manual handling athlete or something along those lines, I didn't really have a ring to it. So that's how I come up with the name Tradie athlete. It just seemed to have a nice ring. So that's kind of a bit of a synopsis, is kind of how I got to where I'm at the moment. I guess for me, one of the questions that I probably have for you, that I'd like you guys to think about, is how do you think about the purpose of your business? So in his book, The Infinite Game, Simon Sinek notes that business is an infinite game, and as such should be built on the three sort of foundations that I've listed in the bottom corner there. So advancing a purpose, protecting its people, and generating a profit. And if you're able to do those things, then you can continue to do those things for effectively forever, or for a long time. So the profit piece allows you ultimately to continue to advance your purpose and continue to look after your people. So that's the bit I guess I'm really passionate about. In my mind, there's, you have the health and safety has often focused on the safety components for a long time, and quite rightly so. There's still a whole heap of work that continues to need to be done in that area. But my own personal interest is really in the health part of health and safety, I suppose you'd say, and just seems to be at the moment that kind of health and well-being piece has really come to the forefront in terms of what we can really, where we can actually move the needle a bit and get people more healthy and performing better. So, well, I guess for all intents and purposes, just to give you a bit of a rundown, what is Tradie Athlete? What do we do as a business? So fundamentally, it's I guess an education and a behaviour change program. But the way that I think we're a little bit different to other things that are being offered is, one, we come out to the site. Two, we try and do practical and interactive stuff as opposed to standing up in front of a group and presenting a lecture. So we focus a lot around food, focus a lot around using food as a way to connect with people, which I think has been worked pretty well. Obviously, there's kind of these fundamental areas around nutrition, movements, recovery and sleep that we like to deal with. But there's probably another couple of aspects there. One is on the building site or in the trades or on the construction site, people generally move quite a bit. Not all people. If you're sitting up on the top of a crane, you're not getting a lot of movement during the day. But people tend to have a basic general movement that goes on during the day. And in fact, if we looked at heart rates of people while they're out and about doing their thing, probably sits around that 100 beats per minute, maybe 100, 105, 110, somewhere in that is kind of pretty standard, pretty normal. But we know that for our own cardiovascular fitness and the health of our brains and all of those things, that we need to have a bit of time spent at slightly higher heart rates. So not massively higher, but certainly, maybe that 120, 130 kind of area again, depending on your age. But it's important to spend some time there. So we kind of look at trying to connect with people and think about, well, are you getting any of that sort of thing into your week? And I guess the other area is just making sure people are strong and staying and getting stronger over their working career. Yes, you build up kind of farm boy, farm girl, tradie strength through just doing stuff all the time, and it gives you a real good kind of base. But we want to be looking at sort of key parts of the bodies that are getting injured and whether we can strengthen those areas up as well. So knees, lower backs, etc. I guess the final piece there is just working with company management. So if we're looking at behaviour change and a key emphasis of our program is behaviour change, then we want to be reinforcing and modelling behaviours such as healthy food options, such as wellness sessions, whatever it is that particularly your purpose is driving at. We're keen to get together with you and work out how we can do that better. So when I started Tradie Athlete, I kind of thought a lot around how do I think about high performance sport? What can I bring from my lessons from high performance sport and bring into physical work? But I guess in the last couple of years, I've really tried to tie in much more of human evolution and where we've come from and our genes and things like that into the mix. So I thought that would be quite of a nice way to give you a bit of a bit of context on that stuff as we go through the session today. All right, so pretty much our happiness is dependent on our biological well-being, okay, and it's directed by imperatives that have been laid down by the fact that we and all our ancestors, if you think about it, you're here today because all of your ancestors before you managed to make it through to a point where they had offspring, and you're the result of that, I guess. So it's a bit of a lottery. I'm sure there's a number of times that you had rallies from the past who were this close to not making it through probably childhood, to be honest, back in the day, to be able to have your offspring and sorry, have your ancestors and so on and so forth. So that's kind of how we've ended up where we are today. So what I guess a question for you folks is, what pops into your mind when you think of evolution? Like, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? So it's probably something like this. So the ascent of man kind of diagrams, where we go from ape, then caveman, then us, and then quite often it's a punchline at the end of it. Okay, so we're designed to be wild. I guess we've come from being wild animals in the past, and our genes are based around that. Okay, around our the fact that we were wild, and I guess we survived and continue to survive and passed our genes on down through the generations. So that being the case, kind of that sort of hunter-gatherer culture, things like that, as we moved further and further through time and we got to about 10,000 years ago and started farming, that's when a lot of the kind of issues started for us. Okay, there's some pretty good research looking at pockets in America where there's the local North American Indians back 10,000 years ago. Farming was going on in relatively recent times, even back then. So farming was taking place, and then you had a population of kind of hunter-gatherer folks next to them. And when they look at those people, they looked and saw the hunter-gatherers tended to be bigger, tended to have less disease going on, tended to have less, what would you call it, changes in morphology, changes in their structure, as they went through that time. Whereas once we jumped through into farming and we had the ability to turn, I guess, especially pockets of starches and carbohydrates on, it was kind of a good thing. It allowed more people to be, allowed there to be more people, but it really dialed back on our health. And so that's kind of where things started to some extent. So there's been effectively no biological change in humans from 40 to 50,000 years ago. And everything that we call culture and civilization is built on the same body and the same brain that we had 40 to 50,000 years ago. Okay. So I mentioned a couple of changes earlier. So up until about 20,000 years ago, we were all universally dark-skinned, and it wasn't until we came out of Africa and some of our ancestors moved through Europe that it became advantageous in terms of absorbing vitamin D, which helped us to be able to be, I guess, viable from a passing on our genes perspective. So that's one of the changes that we saw. The other one was we had a bit of malaria. Malaria was a big thing, and so some people developed sickle cell anemia, which is your red blood cells started looking like little moon shapes rather than the nice round discs that they are today. Now that's got some problems associated with it, but it did actually allow people to survive and gave them resistance to malaria. So big message here is this package that we're currently in, Homo sapiens, emerged as a whole in Africa about 50,000 years ago, and not much has really happened since. So I talked about this idea of tame versus wild. Okay, so I guess what I'm referring to here is when we think about the tame idea would be that we break down, we can go in, we can fix a part, we can fix your diet, and that's going to take care of everything. Okay. In the same way that with a Ferrari motor car, we can go in, change a component, find out what's wrong with it, and sort it out, and boom, away you go. The only issue is that this works well with machines, but we're not machines. We were wild animals at one point, and so this is what determined our evolution. So the wild idea, I guess, is to embrace complexity, and so that's kind of what we're going to have a little look at today. So rather than just being like, okay, we can fix this one thing, and that's going to sort out all of your issues, we're often there's a few things that kind of overlay that we want to actually look at and change. So What we're looking at here in this particular slide is, on the left-hand side, we've got somebody who's just been sitting still for 20 minutes, okay? And this is the brain activity associated with that. On the right-hand side, we're looking at someone who's been out walking for 20 minutes, okay? So I guess the key message there is, when you start looking at these things and looking at activities and stuff like that, you see that when we do something, when we move, it creates a firing in the brain. It creates a firing in neurons. So our brains are really geared up towards movement. And when we move, we use our brains. When we connect with people, it sparks off our brains, and the like. So it's a big, I guess, a big component that all brains effectively are invented around this sort of thing, and that's what's important to them. So our brains, the purpose of our brains, and all brains really, is to allow movement, allow manipulation, and allow coordination. And that's what we're having a look at here. So you'll see we're going to talk about components such as human activity, like sleep, like diet, like exercise, but there's important connections between all of these components, okay? And ultimately, each of these activities supports a healthy brain and fires the brain up, so, and allows that brain to be fired up. So in a meaningful, measurable, tangible way, our brain's ability to light up and be hypercharged, full of neural activity, is directly related to these other things being right. Ultimately, it's these neural pathways that sponsor and record your well-being, and ultimately your ability to connect to other human beings. So if we can light up that whole brain, we'll feel a whole lot better. Interesting point from here is, things like recall, learning, and cleverness, they're not super complex in terms of the brain's activity when brains have been looked at around this stuff. But it turns out that stuff that we kind of take for granted, as I've noted there, things like empathy, language, and everyday social skills, and that connection piece, that's the stuff that really fires up the brain. So often you'll see when people are feeling down, when people are feeling kind of withdrawn, that the thing that we really need to do with those people is to connect with them, bring them in, and that helps with firing up their brains and getting them going. Just a little picture here from a session I did in 2019. So this was for FPC, and a big thanks to Steve Barker, Andrew Rowden, and Lee Kaplan from there for getting me involved, and I guess taking a bit of a chance on the program, and just seeing how it kind of evolved and how it worked. Steve's a bit of a sort of superior athlete himself, loves his mountain bike riding and things, so he gets it in terms of those components being good and important for people. But I guess the key thing for me there really was that the message from these guys was, hey, if what we're doing gets one person to change what they're doing, to think about their lives, to think about how they can incorporate some of this stuff, then that's a win for them. And for me, that just, I guess, summed up their particular values, how they saw things, but it also, I guess, gave me that confidence that, I'm not just going into do a box ticking exercise. It's a bit more real, and a bit more trying to create change, trying to get things going with people, knowing that it's not going to happen in one session. So again, the idea here is I've gone to a number of different sites and a number of different projects, and seen similar people from the subbies who are involved along on different parts on different sites over the time, and have been able to establish a bit of a relationship with those people, and reiterate some of this information a number of times. And there's a kind of a bit of a saying that when the person's ready to learn, the coach arrives, if you like. So that being the case, that when someone's ready to take up this information, then we want to be there, and we want to be able to help guide them through, and to help them to help themselves, I guess, effectively is the way that I look at it. So I guess some of the key bits around here, then, if we look at this kind of the nutrition side of things, obviously we need to take in enough nutrients to give ourselves enough energy, but not just energy, but actual nutrition as well. Okay, and there's maybe a bit of a difference between getting in energy and getting in good nutrition. We aren't particularly good, humans aren't particularly good at digestion. The reason for that is in order to move around, in order to run, in order to walk upright, it meant that we had to have pretty small guts. And if you sort of compare the intestines and the like on a human to a cow or a gazelle or an antelope, then they are able to take the grass that's all around them and turn that into energy, whereas we can't do that. So I guess the way we cope with that is we farm that out literally to some of those animals, and then we used we effectively use them to do the digesting for us, and which was I guess a win for us, even though ultimately we couldn't take in that grass. We had an indirect way of doing it. The other way is cooking really allowed us to extract more energy from the food that we ate, and probably the last real fundamental bit is in the bottom right hand corner there of the slide. You'll see what's effectively some microbes, and we're learning more and more that this microbiome, that these cells and microbes that we have in our gut and bacteria are actually breaking down the food for us and helping to break down the food. And there's some sort of fascinating research around that side of things as to whether or not, if we've got things going right with regards to the microbiome, and if we're feeding our microbiome the right things, then it tends to give us better health. But conversely, we can really, I guess, make our health worse by feeding ourselves the wrong things. The microbiome takes we'd increase the population of quote unquote bad bacteria. If we have a sort of a really high sugary diet, we'll turn on lots of bacteria that love sugar in our system, and push down the relative amounts of some of the other bacteria that we can bring back up if we're eating the right food. So if we eat the right stuff, we're putting in the food that certain microbes within our gut like, and that gives us better health. There's some crazy studies where they've been able to take fecal samples from people who have low body weight and give it to people who have high body weight. So therefore giving some of the microbiome through to those people, and lo and behold, we see the body weight decrease in these people, and vice versa. Okay, so that's some of the kind of latest research that's around there on that front. So I guess the key thing here, or the key message here really, is diseases that were pretty much absent in Indigenous populations, no matter where they lived, they were absent, and then they came to fruition, I suppose, once we started farming. So we tended to, I guess, at the end of the day, this whole industrialization piece or agriculture piece is what has led to where we currently at. And even if we went back, say, 50, 60 years ago, type 2 diabetes wasn't really a thing. But certainly as there's been more and more, as we've had more and more food available and more of kind of the wrong things, sugar, in terms of sugar. I mean, don't get me wrong, blood sugar is an important thing to keep at a level, but effectively what it means when we take in more and more sugar is where sugars are poison by that point. Is actually causing us a lot of trouble. So some people would say, well, these are diseases of longevity. I guess that some of the things that we've picked up, i.e. you've got to die of something, right? Now that may, or that might be a compelling argument, or sorry, that might be somewhat true, but then we can also look at the rise of diabetes in teenagers and say, well, actually, you know, there's something going on there in regards to how we're actually thinking about this problem and how we're approaching it. So, yeah, civilization, you know, I'm not really saying we should turn back the clock completely on civilization because we know our kids don't die as often and we don't get as much infection and we don't get sort of full of parasites and the like. But it's just that the cost of civilization and diseases of civilization are to some extent reversible. So if we can pay close attention to what lies at the root of this and look at our kind of genetic, our wild selves and what our wild selves require, then potentially we can, I guess, get through a lot of this stuff and actually turn back the clock, if you like, on our health and actually get ourselves moving better and the like. So we're looking at the moment at an overarching environment that we're currently working in. So this is kind of, I guess this defines the landscape of where we're working in, and we've got to keep that in mind when we're looking at solutions for our health and well-being. So pretty much the aims, or our aims, should be as human beings to be good eaters, to move well and move enough, to get good sleep and get enough sleep, to connect with others is super important, and to try and get out in nature and spend some time outside every day. And I guess lastly, be present and mindful. Now, some of these things are, again, coming back to physical workers. Okay, you might not be out in nature when you're on necessarily when you're on a site, but you are outside, you are getting a bit more vitamin D through sunlight than the average person who's sitting in office all year round. So there's definitely some massive positives in terms of your health and the way that you're moving and things like that. I guess there's probably just a few key areas that we could focus on. So yeah, I don't want to be the sugar police. It's not really my role, but certainly, you know, I've been to enough sites, been to enough kind of even businesses who have their own lunchrooms, have their own cafes and things like that, to know that there's a bunch of people out there who this kind of is typically what they might take in through the day. So they're not taking in one V, but they might be taking in 3 or 4 monster drinks across the day, and that's what they're living off, what they're topping their blood sugar up with. And then they get a crash in blood sugar, and then they have to have another one to bring it back up. Okay, massive pressure on your system, massive pressure on your ability to kind of produce insulin and deal with this stuff and get that blood sugar out of the system and storing it ultimately into your liver, into your muscles, and then into your fat cells. So there are definitely up there with the things that are causing a bunch of our problems. So when we look at our this Tradie Fuel program within Tradie Athlete, what we're trying to think of is, well, what are a couple of the key things that we're really trying to address. So number one, making sure you've got enough energy and enough hydration on the work site. And then number two, and I guess this is the important one, is that you're getting in enough during the day so that you can actually do the things that you want to do outside of work. Okay, so again, when you're at home, you're getting in enough food to support or improve your body composition, to support your health span, which I guess is about staying healthier for longer over the long period. So those are probably kind of a couple of the key messages there. These are a couple of examples of the food that we cook together with the guys out on site. Top one's a breakfast burrito. So just again, giving people other options other than stopping and grabbing a V on the way, you know, that there are other options and things that you can cook yourself or cook with a group of people that are relatively well priced and can be knocked out pretty well. On these sites, it was pretty cool actually. They had kind of barbecues that were accessible for anyone to use when they wanted to. So if you didn't like, there's some people out there who aren't so keen on sandwiches and things like that, then there's an ability to cook something pretty quick that you can enjoy. And then the bottom example there was actually a halloumi salad. So we're trying to push the boundaries out a bit with people, introduce them to things they might not have had before. This is actually surprisingly popular. People, maybe turn their nose up initially, then try a bit of it, and it's just giving people some other options and saying, hey, look, you can get your protein from other sources. It doesn't always need to be meat. So that was another good option that we kind of looked at. So we're all about action learning, and this is just this is kind of our, I guess, the education piece that follows on from the food. So we cook some food, and often I do the bulk of that in terms of prepping stuff, getting ready for when people come in offsite into the tea rooms, and then you'll see on the table there's a few of the kind of booklets that have got some of the information about the program in it, and we'll then tend to do some education session within that and tied around some of these food times. So that's kind of a nice way of using people's stomachs to get to their brains, I suppose, probably a good way of putting it. Yeah. All right. So I guess fundamentally, there's, we're designed for a few different things, and there's five key aspects to performance. So we're designed to move. It affects everything from circulation and digestion right through to immunity. We're designed to play and interact, and in fact, that's a requirement of all other mammals. So I'm sure you've all seen dolphins, whether it's live or on the telly playing. So, all mammals are designed for that play and that connection piece. And that's probably one thing that as adults we do less of, although some of us play sports, I suppose, and the like. But it's a massive piece that I guess is important to think about in terms of your own health and longevity and connection to people, whether it be children or your own children or other people. So movement and exercise are great for our brains. It creates growth in our brains, and it allows more adaptability and more complex movement to be layered on top of that. So we're also driven to eat. So our genes, our genetics, our wild selves through evolution is really designed for us to grab hold of whatever it can to take in food, to take in energy. So because back in the day, it was important that there were times of scarcity and times of feast, so that doesn't happen so much anymore. We just tend to be in a constant time of feasting. So there does, and so in some ways our bodies and our genetics are really set up against us in terms of and on that front, in terms of kind of maintaining healthy body weight and the like. So on the one hand, we're driven for food. On the other hand, we're driven to conserve energy. So, and that conservation of energy is about trying to get us through the bad times when there isn't much food around. And you'll remember that photo of from earlier with the evolution with the person drinking a soda and things like that. So we're just in a time now where we have way too much food and way too much ability to get hold of food. Sleep is obviously super important. It helps to regulate our body's rhythms. It allows us to relearn what we did during the day. It allows us to recover and repair and reduce inflammation. And poor sleep at the end of the day can lead to people, can lead to depression. It can lead to being overweight, and it can lead to being less intelligent. So sleep can have a massive impact on all of those things on our whole body. And it comes back to that complexity piece, as I said before. It's not like you can just go in and fix this thing here and that'll solve all your issues. But sometimes you need to find that lever, and if sleep's your lever, if sleep's the thing that you're particularly not doing well and really battling with, then that could be the thing that you use to help you moving forward. In fact, athletes like Rafael Nadal, LeBron James, they're getting up to maybe 12 hours of sleep a day, and often having that kind of accessory sleep in the afternoon as well, to get more release of growth hormone, which allows them to repair and also a chance to learn the stuff that maybe they were working on prior to that sleep, and helps them with their overall performance. So we've also evolved to connect to people. We've evolved to be part of a tribe, and this connection releases oxytocin, which is also called the cuddle drug. You think about it, when mums give birth, it's obviously the actual whole process of it, I suppose, is not maybe the most pleasant process in the world to go through, and can be pretty painful. So as that baby pops out, there's a massive release of oxytocin in the mum's brain, and that's evolution in action there. So that's really creating that connection, even though it's just been the most painful thing in someone's life going on. It's just created that connection and that bond, which again, in a tribe situation, being part of a tribe, being part of a well-functioning team, makes you feel valued, makes you feel part of the team, makes you release oxytocin, and increases your performance. And I guess the last one there would be just getting out of nature. So if we can get in the bush, or go for a walk, luckily enough to get a dog about a year ago, and so I've been doing much more walking in my local neighbourhood with the dog up and just on the town belt. You know, we're not miles away from houses and the like, but it just, yeah, you know, when you're out there, it feels amazing. And the research would all suggest that it releases serotonin and dopamine within our brains. In fact, there's some crazy kind of ideas there that if you put photos or big murals on the walls in hospital wings with the beds, that people need less pain relief, they get better faster and move on out of the hospital quicker. And the same thing with studying and with exam results. So if we have exam halls that are in nature, I mean, have windows out to the bush, or they have murals of pictures of nature on the walls, then there's an improvement. There's been shown to be an improvement in exam results just through that, helping out with our brain function. So all of these things are interrelated to human performance, but quite often we don't look at it like this, do we? We don't kind of think about the whole. So they don't happen in isolation, and so trying to fix your diet without considering maybe some of these other factors is not optimal, maybe not the best way to go. But sometimes, again, the diet piece, that nutrition piece, could be the big lever for you that ultimately allows you to move forward and tick off a bunch of these things. So I guess what I'm really encouraging people to do is think about themselves as athletes. Okay, at what would LeBron do? Obviously it's a little bit different. It's a little bit different in terms of I'm not asking people to live as monks. Everyone's got to have a life and have a lifestyle that they want. But in terms of getting the most out of yourself, and feeling good and the like, if we can get people to kind of connect to that idea of okay, I want to be thinking more like an athlete. How should I be thinking about nutrition and hydration, and then getting them to not just think like that, but also act like that. So this is really what Tradie Athlete's about, I suppose, at the end of the day. So if we can do these things right, if we can move, eat, sleep, connect, and get into nature, then that leads us to this kind of optimal performance area. So clarity, focus, we're more healthy, more engaged, more happy, and more resilient. Okay, so I guess that, again, it's a pretty key thing. All of this leads to, I guess, a culture of well-being, and people can see that they're kind of in a culture that values this, and that in turn leads to more trust of your people, and the more trust in I guess them of you and your organisation, that improves job performance and ultimately keeps people either in the job with you for longer, or or helping with their overall longevity. Okay, so longevity in the job, not having to recruit more people because you're looking after the things that ultimately are super important to them, and that kind of moves us in the right direction. So you feel valued by your organisation, but you're also resilient when you need to be. I guess that's probably the key message here. So rather than if we're kind of taking the opposite, if the athlete kind of comes from that, and we're thinking about that wild animal that we used to be, if we're acting like a kind of an animal, a tame animal, an animal that lives in a cage, an animal that doesn't get enough movement, that has crappy food and spends all its time by itself and inside, then ultimately that tends to send us down this line of sickness and injury. And if we get injured, it takes us longer to recover and repair from that injury. Working in rehab, you certainly see this with people with who have diabetes, is that their bodies take way longer to heal than other people. So yeah, a bunch of digestive issues and a general lack of energy. I think this is one of the key points actually, is that really what we need to be focused on is not so much time management, although clearly when you're running a project and stuff, that's important, but with your people, it's energy management. It's how much energy do your people have that they're able to put into the work and stay focused, stay on target, and move forward. So if we can build up people's energy, and if we can kind of manage their energy levels and get their energy levels better, then to me, that's really the key thing that we want to be thinking about moving forward. That's probably one of the sort of real key messages, is just, it's about energy management. So no culture of well-being, not feeling particularly, I guess, linked to anything. So a lack of trust, decreased performance, and ultimately decreased productivity and increased cost. So I guess for me, looking forward, my vision really of the future is having well-priced, healthy food trucks on site, and having people choosing options such as water and soda water with lemon in it, or whatever, rather than drinking 4 cans of Monster a day just to get your energy up. So not so much because you ban those things from the site, but because people aren't interested in buying those anymore. Look, don't get me wrong. Hey, if it's a super hot day and we've been digging holes all morning, and it gets to the afternoon and I'm thirsty and feeling like I need a bit of a pick-me-up, then maybe I have a can of Coke, okay? But number one, I'm not doing it every day, and number two, I'm not having 5 cans of Coke in that day. So there's time and a place for that, but it's not surviving off 4 or 5 cans of Monster drink day after day after day, and maybe washing down a choice meat pie with that as well, So it's about people having an ability to, my vision would be, looking at that top left picture, it's about people having an ability to carry out some of the aspects of fitness that aren't developed on the job. If for example, you had a setup like this or something similar on a work site, you think about people working 6 days a week or pulling 60+ hour weeks. If you're able to actually provide some of this stuff on site, and you say to people, hey, look, I know you're on site here for 60 hours a week or 55 hours a week, whatever it is. If you want to take 15 minutes of your lunch time, and then I'll give you another 15 minutes, and extend your lunch for 15 minutes, and 3 times a week, half an hour, we'll get you through here, and we'll run through some exercises specific to you, specific to your injuries, and say, your sore knees that you've had for the last 20 years. we'll work on some things here, or if it's cardiovascular fitness that we want to boost up. That, to me, that's kind of my, I guess, vision of how this could be, where this could go to. As I've said, it's about finding which lever you can pull that makes a difference in a tradie's life. So is it the sleep piece? Is it the nutrition piece? Is it the exercise piece? Well, we like to, and we're starting to evaluate, I guess, people in the first sessions around what, how do these things work for them, and then making, tailoring our delivery to those individuals based on that feedback that we get, and then just seeing how things have improved once we've seen the person over a number of sessions over the year. So for many people, I think that the nutrition piece is a lever that can be pulled first, and will have effects on a bunch of those other things. Okay, but it's not, as I've said, it's not the only lever, and it's not like we just want to take care of that and that'll sort everything else out. We could deal with nutrition, but it might be that what's leading to your kind of excess body weight is actually your poor sleep, or your microbiome. Okay, so, and you might go to me, well, how can we change that? Well, as we said before, it's about over time putting in the right foods that then bring up the right populations of microbes within your system. So I guess my big question for you folks is what's your vision for the future of your tribe? Okay, so what do what's your, coming back to your purpose, and coming back to how you see that you want to help your people to help themselves. Okay, because that's another big belief that we have, is that it's not about doing it all for people, but it's about helping to empower people, helping to boost their self-efficacy and self-confidence up, so that they create a vision for themselves, and then they start to move in that direction. So that's pretty much it from me. I know we're going to have some questions shortly, but if you're keen to explore more, I mean, we've got lots of ideas and experience of in helping people get better, and we'd love to hear from you to see if how we can help you to align the purpose of your business with some of these opportunities. And then my details obviously are here in the slide, or you can access through my website and click on the Book Us for Your Site tab, and there's a box that will kind of come up and then allow you to fire through an email to me and allow you to connect with me. So
thanks very much, Andy. That's great. Look, in talking to sort of the general public, there's a real a viewpoint or an observation really that there are many, if you walk past the site, there's many people who work on those sites who really aren't looking after themselves. You see them out at lunchtime, they're eating the fast food such as pies, drinking sugary drinks and the caffeine drinks, which you alluded to before. So when you do your work with the likes of first principle constructors and others, how receptive have you found those construction workers to adopt those behavioural changes that you're advocating around exercise, nutrition and sleep?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, I guess the other kind of key point there is, yeah, you've got a wide variety of people on the site. You've got some, and it's surprising the people who are actually interested in the message. You'd think, oh, well, there'd be the old dudes who aren't interested, and maybe the young ones who might be interested. But actually, what you'll often find is people who are kind of, I guess, already into sport and already into activity. They can see the thing quite quickly, and it's actually oftentimes the young ones where the work needs to go into. They feel like they're 10 foot tall and bulletproof, and they can do pretty much anything. And that's kind of true, right? Our bodies are so good at buffering being treated badly that they can deal with the wrong thing, quote unquote, the wrong thing for a long period of time, and still come up from that. But so I've kind of seen a spectrum across the board, really, where we've seen some folks who have been some of the older guys who are like, well, you know what? Yeah, there's some things here that I either have been thinking about or I've started to implement, we've had a couple of good success stories where people have, for example, someone who was like, right, well, I've just got to start going to the gym in the morning before work, and I fully appreciate the sacrifice that these people are making. They're on site for pretty long hours. They're going into the gym first thing, but his thing was, well, if I do that and I can do my exercise that I'm not getting on the job, then I'm going to feel better. And if I leave it to the end of the day, there's often a chance where I won't do it because, work is tiring and the like. So, we've seen a good mix of people who are prepared to take on some of the messages. And I guess it's that other thing, is it's that coming back to people, as I said earlier. It's like, maybe session number one, the message, they're not ready for the message, or they're not, but once we come back to them and we've repeated the same stuff and we've tweaked things and modified our approach, and we're always, it's not the content that we're delivering that's the difficult piece. It's really the connection to people is a difficult piece, right? And the connection and the context that we're putting that content within. And that's kind of where we, I guess, pride ourselves on, is that ability to create that connection to people. And that ultimately is the piece that helps to drive behavior change and the like. It's not the content that we're giving to people.
So on your previous slide, you posed the question, what's the vision that your tribe has for your industry? And wellbeing is very much a focus across the industry. Certainly as the NZIOB, we had a strategy day just less than a month ago, and wellbeing was right up there. And there's a view that in terms of mental health, we've got a lot of focus on that. We're doing really good work with the likes of mates in construction. So that has been a very purposeful focus of the industry. In terms of physical health, which is your particular area of expertise, not so much. So perhaps if I could pose the question, if there was one on-site intervention that a construction company could make that can improve the physical health of their employees on a site, what would it be?
Without even a shadow of a doubt, I'd say it would be putting some good quality food on site, and at a price point that people were prepared to pay, that maybe even challenged. You can do some maths on it, work out what it costs for 4 cans of V across the day, but good tasting, healthy food, and it needs to be in healthy food that actually the demographic of people that are on site want to eat. It can't be all couscous. There might be some couscous, but it can't be it can't be all of that. So just trying to work out some of those key things. But I think, to me, from having a look around, that's probably be one of the critical things that could be done, and could be done pretty well.
And one of your slides showed some images of food trucks. And there was one slide also of some physical activities or equipment attached to that. And to your knowledge, because we're all talking about interventions on site, to your knowledge, are there any studies internationally that have been measured, will be measuring the result of physical health interventions?
I'm sure there are. I haven't come across those yet. But that will be one thing that I'll go away and have a little bit of a look at. I guess I've kind of come at it from a sort of a more higher level first principles perspective, as opposed to the specifically in this area. But that we know in terms of the general research on health and how that spreads out to people. We know some of the information just in terms of that's been carried out in America, actually looking at physical education and kids at schools. So when they do these programs, there's one place in America where obviously America's always held up as being this place where the health is kind of tracking pretty quickly in the wrong direction. But there's one particular place there where they've been running a program for, I think, about 20 years, and have showed that the kids, the fitter the kids are across all ages, and I guess by proxy, the healthier they are in some ways, the better they're scoring on tests. So there's something about physical activity in the brain that is such a kind of a fundamental to our health and to our performance, that it's almost a no-brainer.
We're just landing on 1 o'clock, but we've got a question here from one of the attendees. Is it the project managers / site managers who are generally the individuals tasked with driving these initiatives on site? I would have thought so.
When I've been working on the sites that I've been on, I've had a pretty good link with whoever the health and safety person is on that particular site, and also potentially the health and safety person from within the head office of the company who's come in and had a look at things there as well. So those are the key. And then the site managers and stuff, obviously I'm working in with around, well, is this a good day to come? Is this a good time to sort of be on your site? But fundamentally it's kind of working with the whole business to make sure that it works, because I guess that's the other thing we're trying to do is we realize that these are working sites and that people are trying to, I guess, get things going and do their, get the work done. And so we're really trying to blend in our stuff with the fact that it's a working site and it's got a project and it's got a deadline. So we want to be as useful as possible, but in that context.
Great. Andy, thanks very much for the good work that you're doing, focusing general health wellbeing in the construction industry. We need more of this, and NZIOB was very pleased to have you shine a light on some of those initiatives and some of your thinking. So thank you very much, and thank you for those who attended, and just a reminder that this video of this will be uploaded to your membership platforms later on this afternoon. Thanks again, and have a great afternoon.
Thanks.